life for a simple reason. All humans are endowed, or actually all organisms, are endowed with something called the biological imperative. The biological imperative is an understanding in biology which has no mechanism to match it, but it's a reality, and that is this: that every organism, from a bacterium to a human, when threatened, will do every maneuver possible to stay alive. In other words, there's a drive to stay alive. An animal or a bacterium even will not just sit there and say, go ahead and kill me. So that there's a built-in nature, a drive to stay alive, we call it the biological imperative. When you start to become threatened, when you feel a threat to your survival, you can actually feel it in your gut and in your heart. You can feel that something's going on. And then you go around the world today and talk to other people, and everyone is saying, I know something is, I can feel something is going on here. And what you're feeling is that we are actually being threatened. Our survival as a species is now really under total threat. But it's interesting because when the threats occur, the challenges happen, as civilization goes into decline, it doesn't mean it's the end of civilization. What it really signals is the beginning of another civilization that will start up. And as that other civilization starts up, of course it's got that developmental phase, which is filled with what Toynbee called creative minorities, or others have called cultural creatives. These are people who are seeking new insights, new awareness, and a new way of life. By your presence in this room today, you have already acknowledged that you are part of the cultural creatives of a future evolution, because you're all looking for a new understanding, a new way of life, and how we can move forward in this world. And so I said, well, okay, this is how the civilizations form and how they die out and then are reborn again. But what is it that actually shapes the civilization? So really what happened was this. Over 10,000 years ago, humans recognized that there were two realms to their universe, a physical realm and an invisible realm. The invisible realm people call about maybe the spiritual realm or the energy realm or whatever it is, as compared to the physical material realm that we live in. And it's interesting because if you look at the progress of civilizations over time, there's a change in the population's belief in which is more important, the material realm, the spiritual realm, or are they both equally important? Each civilization has a different insight into which is more important, and you can see this change, which I plotted out in my book. And so basically what I really want to show you right now is just some excerpts, and I'll start with the first understanding that we can look at a civilization and then say we can base it on whether the civilization is more spiritual or more engrossed in the material plane, or at 50-50 in the middle line. I say, yeah, but what is it that shapes the civilization? And the answer to that question is this. There's something called the perennial questions. They've been asked for thousands of years. And the perennial questions are the following questions. How did we get here? Why are we here? And now that we're here, how do we make the best of it? Now here comes an interesting insight. Whoever we buy the answers from for the questions, we make that entity or organization the truth provider for the civilization. So whoever you buy the answers from, you also go seek all the other knowledge you want to know about the world from the same people or organization. But then here comes a very simple truth as well. When the answers to the questions change, in other words, when the public accepts different answers, that signals the end of the old civilization and the beginning of a new civilization, and the handing over of the torch of knowledge to the new provider for the new answers. So this becomes very critical because, as you can see, when the answers change, the civilization is in a process of changing itself. So if I just jump way ahead on this understanding, then what we're going to talk about is what is called the basal paradigm, which is the belief systems that are derived from the answers. So when you get the answers to the questions, you don't just say, oh, great, those answers are really nice. You take the answers and then you form a way of life that conforms to the answers, so you live in harmony with the answers to the questions. So the basal paradigm not only provides answers to the questions, but it shapes the character of the culture. So if I start right here, I'll just start over. I actually have the chart already going up a bit, but let me go off. Start with animism. First, like the Native Americans, just to give you an insight. The Native Americans believed that everything that was made out of matter was also spiritual. So they had a 50-50 understanding that matter and spirit were equally valuable. And so basically, they lived in a world honoring both. You wanted to hunt for the deer, you really first had to pray for the deer's spirit to get access to the hunt. And so basically they saw both of them were totally connected with each other. What happened over time, though, is that we left the material behind us. We went into polytheism and created gods to take the spirit out of the individual matter. So the American Indians would say every drop of rain had spirit in it, every tree had spirit in it, every human had spirit in it. By the time you got to polytheism, though, the spirit was taken out of the individual objects and then coalesced into a number of different gods. So the individual matter no longer had the spirit. The tree didn't have the spirit, the raindrop didn't have a spirit, there was a god of water, a god of plants, and humans didn't have any more spirit either. And so all of a sudden, the emphasis was more on the gods than it was on the material plane. This really reached the culmination of that point in monotheism. And monotheism took all the different gods, put them all together in one spirit, and then shipped that spirit off the planet. So there was no longer a spirit left on this planet. And the issue about that is then we became so engrossed in wanting to become part of the spirit that the planet actually was recognized as damned, that you didn't really want to get caught up in the trappings and the possessions of the material realm because it would take you away from spirit. And that's why the church came in to help us, because they took everybody's money and everybody's possessions. Try to help them so they can go off to another plane. The church answered the faithful paradigm questions, and the first question was, how did you get here? Well, in monotheism, how we got here is divine intervention, which is the picture of God and Adam in the Sistine Chapel, with a little finger-touching thing like that, and that's where we got our life because God infused it with us. And then you say, well, why are we here? Well, the church's answer to that was very simple. It said, basically, you're only here for a test to see if you can go to the better place. So basically, we were here to live out place of morality, to see if you could live here without being attached to the earth, so you can let this plane go and go to the other place. And so we were here trying to be morally correct and live this way, so nobody was really concerned about the life on here. They were all focusing on the life at the other place. And in this process, they said, well, how did you make the best of it? And the answer was simply, we live by the laws of the Bible, the laws of the Scripture, so we have these rules. And I said, well, this is really cool. We live according to this paradigm, and we have a very much spiritual emphasis in our lives. But at some point, there was abuse from the church, which was unavoidable, because the church claimed they had infallible knowledge. And infallible knowledge, well, knowledge is power. Infallible knowledge is absolute power. And anything absolute absolutely corrupts at some point. And that led to the Reformation. Well, the Reformation was cool because what it did is it broke the knowledge control that the church had over the public. And what it also allowed for was the development of science. Because now people could go in and look at the world and come up with answers that differ from the church without worrying about being burned at the stake or anything like that for their heretical views. So we opened up in the world of science. It's very interesting. In opening up in the world of science, what we did is we went from the spiritual realm, and I jumped way back so you can see the pathway. What happened here is that we went into the Reformation. We became a little bit more ensconced in the material plane for a simple reason. The Protestants had a good idea. They said, well, having possessions isn't bad because if God loves you, God will allow you to have possessions. So having possessions was now a reference of your spirituality. So materialism wasn't so bad anymore. And then we started to come down and you see we crossed the line, and it's a very important part where we crossed the line with something called deism. And deism was a very interesting belief. It was based on the Age of Enlightenment. It was based on the philosophers like John Locke in England and Rousseau in France. And I said, well, what does deism represent? Well, here's what happened. In Europe at the time especially, there was a caste system. You were born into a lower class. That was your fate in life. No matter what you did, you could never get out of the lower class. You were born into the upper class. Again, fate in life. No matter what you did, you would be lost from the upper class. And this was a problem of great limitation. And yet the Age of Enlightenment gave us a philosophy of a utopian world where humans could stand on their own feet and become anything that they could become by their own effort and their own genius to create something out of their own lives. And this was greatly appealing to those people whose lives were totally limited by a class structure. I said, well, where did they get this idea of a utopian world? Well, here's the fun part. The fun part is it came from Rousseau primarily. I said, yeah, but where did Rousseau come up with the Age of Enlightenment philosophy? And the answer is he studied the American Indians. And he talked about the noble savage. And he talked about a person who could stand on the land and create the most out of their life with no other people limiting them. They were just their own creators and creating their own world. And the reason why then deism crosses the line is because deism was the belief that nature and God were one and the same. And the relevance about nature and God being one and the same, that's exactly the story that the American Indians have told. And this came into our world, and I said, well, why did it come into our world? Because I said, well, who are the deists of renown? I go, well, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, John Adams, Thomas Paine, the list goes on. You recognize these are the founding fathers of the United States. And the significance about that is, and I didn't put the slide in, but I really wanted to mention it right now. It's very important because at this time when the fundamentalists are really trying to push our country into a theocracy and claiming that the United States is a Christian nation, this is a bold-faced lie. The United States was never a Christian nation. All you have to read is the first sentence in the Declaration of Independence, because it says that this country was created in the name of nature and of nature's God, which was the deist philosophy. And so basically, it was a place of balance again, 50-50. But the problem with that is nothing stays the same. Time moved on. In 1859, that's when everything changed. 1859 is when Charles Darwin came in. Science, although creating miracles up to Charles Darwin, could not take over the basal paradigm for a very simple reason. The first question in the basal paradigm is, how did you get here? Well, science had no answer until Darwin came in 1859. Darwin offered the concept that we got here through random mutations, okay? And the significance about that is that the random mutation idea was so readily accepted by the public over the concept of Genesis that was being promulgated by the church. So the idea is people start to listen to Darwin about, oh yeah, you take two parents, you make them together, you get a litter of offspring. A lot of the litter has all the traits of the parents, and every now and then a weirdo forms in that litter. And then you take that weirdo and you say, well, what if you bred the weirdo and ultimately you create a whole new species? Well, this was not, so far-fetched for those people in the States, because before Game Boys and television sets, the primary entertainment was breeding plants and animals. So everyone was familiar with the appearance of a weirdo. So when it didn't take but a few years for the entire paradigm of the church to just give way, and people bought into the new belief system.